phones, Babylons can't crack the
What do YouTube? B. Kelly back again with another banger. In today's video, y'all, I'm going to be talking about my Senior Bowl winners and losers. Now, what I mean by winners and losers, the winners had a really good week and they increased their draft stock, and the losers had a bad week and their draft stock has fallen. The first winner I will be talking about today is cornerback out of the University of Oklahoma, Tre Brown. Now, 4 years at Oklahoma, Tre Brown had a total of 141 tackles, 8.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 4 interceptions, and 31 pass deflections. And that's not even talking about what he did in the kick return game at Oklahoma. These past few seasons at Oklahoma, Tre Brown has been one of the more consistent cornerbacks and defensive players at the University of Oklahoma, but the biggest knock against Tre Brown in his game is that he is undersized. He only stands in at 5'10" and 186 pounds and is a smaller cornerback. He has speed, but he does have a tendency to get handsy, especially with bigger players. Going into the Senior Bowl, Tre Brown was seen as a guy in the NFL draft that was going to be selected late day 3 and even maybe undrafted. But he had a huge week, especially in the one-on-ones versus the other receivers, where now Tre Brown is even projected to go as high as the 4th round, which is a big improvement from potentially being undrafted. My first loser from the Senior Bowl week is quarterback out of Georgia, Jamie Newman. Now, Jamie Newman did not play a single snap at Georgia due to opting out of the 2020 college football season. But going into the 2020 college football season, Jamie Newman was seen as someone that was a potential dark horse Heisman contender and was seen as someone that could potentially be a first-round pick in the 2021 NFL Draft, and this was all in the preseason for the 2020 college football season. Now, he last played real college football at Wake Forest when he had a big junior season where he completed 61% of his passes, threw for 2,868 yards, 26 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. Since Jamie Newman has opted out of the 2020 college football season, his draft stock has plummeted. He came from a potential first-round pick to now a projected day 3 selection. And Jamie Newman at the Senior Bowl in this past week, he struggled a lot. He looked like he has not played football competitively in a year in which he really hasn't. His last real snap in a game was at Wake Forest all the way in 2019, and at the Senior Bowl he struggled immensely. And even in the game, I know he didn't have any protection when he was in from his O-line. His O-line was awful. But Jamie Newman still didn't do anything, and he even threw an interception. And his draft stock has definitely plummeted from the Senior Bowl week. With my next winner from the Senior Bowl week, I have Michael Carter out of North Carolina, the running back. Now, Michael Carter had a very good career at North Carolina, in which he rushed for 3,404 yards, averaging 6.6 yards per carry, and 22 rushing touchdowns. And he's coming off a very strong 2020 college football season, in which he played in 11 games, rushing for 1,245 yards, averaging an insane 8 yards per carry, and 9 rushing touchdowns. Going into the Senior Bowl week, Michael Carter was seen as a day 2 selection in this upcoming 2021 NFL Draft, and he still is. That's mainly because you do not see many running backs getting drafted in the first round, and it's pretty much a consensus. If there's a running back that's going to be drafted in round 1 of the 2021 NFL Draft, it's either going to be Najee Harris or Travis Etienne. But Michael Carter arguably had the best week out of all the running backs in the Senior Bowl. He seemed like he was the best back in the practices. He definitely had the best performance out of all the running backs that week in the game. He was the only one that scored, and he was the only one that actually got past the line of scrimmage multiple times and was averaging an insane amount of yards per carry. You can definitely expect Michael Carter to be one of the first running backs taken in this upcoming NFL Draft. With my next loser for the Senior Bowl week, I have Deonte Brown, offensive lineman from Alabama. Now, I do know this might get some hate because he's coming from a very strong team with an especially great offensive line from the 2020 college football season, even the best offensive line in college football this past season. But I have to point out the obvious. I cannot ignore it, and I cannot just say, look what he did in the 2020 college football season. He got exposed in the Senior Bowl week. he was getting beat multiple times by fast defensive linemen, and you can definitely see some teams in the NFL that might abuse that. And I know he has a lot of potential because of his size, his speed for his size, and his athleticism. But he really struggled this week in the Senior Bowl. He was already projected to be a day 2 pick, and I still think he will go day 2, but he might even fall into day 3 because the way he performed in the practices, he was getting abused almost the entire time. In the game, he was a little bit better, but even sometimes in the game, when they put faster defenders on him, he really struggled to keep up. With my next winner from the Senior Bowl week, this one is my personal favorite, and I'll probably butcher his last name. Sorry if I do, and this is none other than Quinn Meinerz, the D3 Beast. Going into the Senior Bowl week, I can bet not many people knew who Quinn was, and I definitely didn't know at all until I started watching the practices and just saw a guy from a D3 school completely bullying some of the top defensive linemen in this upcoming NFL draft. This guy had his way with everyone. He even injured his hand one day and came back the next day with it taped up to show the scouts what he was about. This guy, honestly, might have been one of the best performances in the week, especially on the offensive line. This guy was just bullying everyone. I don't think I saw this guy struggle once, and this guy definitely increases draft stock in 1 week. I mean, this guy was projected to be a day 3 player, possibly undrafted, but he was projected to go day 3 primarily, and he might even get drafted in day 2 now. With my next loser, I have defensive tackle out of Florida State, Marvin Wilson. Now, Marvin Wilson was actually projected to be a potential first-round pick in the 2020 NFL Draft before he decided to come back for his senior year at Florida State. Now, in his senior season in the 2020 college football season, he was probably one of the more disappointing players in college football. He had a lot of hype to his name. He really didn't do anything that impressive. He only had 17 tackles, 2 for loss, and only 1 sack. Since the 2020 NFL Draft to now the Senior Bowl, he has plummeted in his draft stock. He was seen as a potential first-round pick to now a day 2 selection, and I think his stock might have fallen even more after his week at the Senior Bowl. His week at the Senior Bowl, he really wasn't that impressive and really wasn't able to get off the blocks like he did in his breakout junior season, and the only guy he could really get off blocks on was Deonte Brown. Now, I still do think Marvin Wilson will be a day 2 selection, but I do think he will go a lot later in day 2 than he was originally thought to be going into the Senior Bowl week. The last player I'm going to be talking about today is a winner, and this is none other than wide receiver / running back Demetric Felton out of UCLA. Now, Felton had a very good career at UCLA in the rushing game and receiving game. His all-purpose yards for 4 years is 2,059 yards, averaging 6.2 yards per time he had the ball, and 15 total touchdowns through the air and receiving combined together. Now, Felton is going to have a lot of NFL teams after him because he can do damage on the ground and damage through the air. Felton was listed as a running back this past week at the Senior Bowl, but he was primarily lined up as a wide receiver, and he was primarily doing all wide receiver drills. Now, Felton, and I can confidently say this, was probably one of the best receivers, if not the best receiver at the Senior Bowl this week. He seemed like he was the best running all of his routes, doing all the drills, and he was definitely the best receiver in the game, and he was one of the only receivers in the game that actually had a touchdown. I definitely feel like Felton's stock went up after the Senior Bowl this past week, and I feel like he might even be a second-round pick and definitely a day 2 selection, and a lot of teams are going to be after him because of his versatility. Well, guys, now that I'm at the end of the video, remember to smash that like button, turn on them post notifications, and subscribe for more videos. B. Kelly, out!